your dead rose bush is not dead. That brown, brittle stick out by the fence, the one you were fixing to dig out this weekend, it can come back. I have seen it come back. My grandfather brought back a rose that looked deader than a fence post, and he did it with something already sitting in the kitchen. Not a bottle from the store, not a $40 bag of blue crystals, something you already own. I was raised plain in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and we never once bought rose food. Not a single time. My people have kept roses climbing over porch rails for generations, and the whole industry that sells you those fancy sacks never had a reason to tell you the truth. They make their money on you not knowing. Simple as that. So stay with me. Right around the middle of this, I am going to show you exactly how to take a rose that looks gone and shock it back to life for less than the price of a cup of coffee, the way my grandfather did it behind our barn. But first, do me one small favor. Drop a comment and tell me where you are growing your state or your growing zone, if you know it. I ask because the cold folks up north and the hot folks down south need to time this a little different, and I want to speak to your yard, not just any yard. I remember standing next to my grandfather on a gray morning in early April, my breath showing in the air, watching him crouch by a rose we all figured was finished. He didn't frown. He just reached into his coat pocket, and what he pulled out is the first thing I want to give you today. It was a banana peel. Now stay with me because I know how that sounds. You are picturing a peel tossed on the dirt, rotting, drawing flies. That is not what we did, and that is not what works. But the reason a banana peel matters to a rose is the same reason the store can charge you so much, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. A rose is a hungry plant, hungrier than most things in your yard. And the one thing it craves more than almost anything when it comes time to make those big heavy blooms is potassium. Potassium is the mineral that builds strong flower stalks, deep color, and blooms that do not flop over in the first hard rain. When your roses come up weak, pale, with buds that brown and drop before they open, 9 times out of 10, they are starving for it. Here's the thing, the banana peel knows that the store hopes you never learn. A dried banana peel is somewhere around 40 to 50% potassium by weight once you cook the water out of it. That is not folklore. That is what it is. The whole reason those expensive bloom-boosting formulas cost what they do is that they are selling you potassium in a jug and charging you like it is gold when the good Lord already put a pile of it inside the fruit you throw in the trash every single week. So here is exactly how we did it and how you do it. Do not just bury a wet peel whole. It rots slow, it draws pests, and the goodness stays locked up too long to help a struggling plant fast. Instead, take 2 or 3 banana peels and dry them. In the old days, we laid them on the warm shelf above the wood stove for a couple of days until they turned black and crisp like a burnt leaf. You can lay them on a windowsill in the sun or set them in your oven on the lowest setting with the door cracked for an hour. Once they snap when you bend them, crush them into a powder between your hands or run them through an old coffee grinder. Then take that dark powder and scratch it into the top inch of soil in a ring about 6 inches out from the base of the rose. Not touching the stem, you never want any fertilizer piled right against the wood. Water it in well. That potassium, now broken down and ready, starts moving down to the roots within days, not months. How often? Once every 3 to 4 weeks through the growing season is plenty. You will start to see it first in the leaves, a deeper, richer green, and then in the buds, which come fuller and hold their color longer. And here is the part that ought to make you a little angry. The big brands know this works. Potassium is potassium, whether it comes from a peel or a plastic sack. They just would rather you never made the connection because a banana costs you nothing extra, and their bloom booster costs you $20, $30, $40 a season. Somebody is profiting from you not knowing. Keep that in the back of your mind because it only gets worse as we go. But potassium alone will not raise the dead. A rose that looks truly gone, all brown canes and no green, needs something more than food. It needs a wake-up call. And that brings me to the second thing, the one that carries the worst reputation and the most misunderstanding of anything in the whole garden, Epsom salt. Now I can already hear half of you groaning because you have read somewhere on the internet that Epsom salt is a myth, that it does nothing, that it is an old wives' tale. And I want to tell you plainly why that is only half true, because the folks who say it does nothing and the folks who swear by it are actually both looking at the same thing from different sides of the fence. Epsom salt is not really salt like the kind on your table. It is magnesium sulfate. Two things a plant can use, magnesium and sulfur. Now here is the honest part, and I will never lie to you to sell you on something. If your soil already has plenty of magnesium, adding Epsom salt does about as much as pouring water in the ocean. That is why some folks see nothing. But roses are heavy feeders, and in a great many yards, especially older gardens where the same beds have grown the same plants for 10, 20, 30 years, the magnesium has been drawn down low. And magnesium is not just any nutrient. It sits at the very center of the chlorophyll molecule, the green pigment that lets a leaf catch sunlight and turn it into food. Think about that for a second. Without magnesium, a leaf literally cannot build the green it needs to feed the plant. That is why a magnesium-starved rose shows yellow leaves with green veins and weak, spindly new growth. The plant is trying to make food and cannot finish the recipe because one ingredient is missing. There is real research behind this, not just barn talk. Studies out of agricultural trials have shown magnesium sulfate applied to roses can push more basal breaks. Those are the brand new canes that shoot up from the very bottom of the plant, the ones that become next year's flowering wood. More basal breaks means a fuller, younger, more vigorous bush. For a rose that looks half dead, those new bottom canes are the whole ball game. That is the plant deciding to live again. Here is how you use it, and the amount matters. 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt dissolved in a gallon of water. Stir it until it disappears. Pour it slowly around the root zone of the rose, about a gallon for a full-grown bush. Do this once in early spring as the buds are swelling, and again about a month later. That is it. Do not dump dry crystals on the ground hoping for the best, and do not do it every week. More is not better, and a plant can only use so much. You can also put that same solution in a spray bottle and mist the leaves lightly in the early morning, because a leaf can drink magnesium right through its surface faster than the roots can pull it up. On a struggling plant, that is the quickest way to get green back into pale foliage. My grandmother used to do exactly this with a mist from a tin can with holes punched in the lid long before anybody sold a fancy sprayer. So now you have potassium for blooms and magnesium for green. But I told you at the start that we bring back roses that look truly dead, and to do that you need the one thing every living plant runs on, the engine of all that new growth, and it happens to be the thing people throw away by the potful every single morning. That is next, and it is the one the coffee drinkers among you have been sitting on this whole time without knowing. Coffee grounds. You brew a pot every morning. You dump the grounds in the trash, or maybe you rinse them down the sink, and every time you do, you are throwing out one of the finest slow nitrogen feeds a rose could ask for, the very thing that grows the leaves and canes that a recovering plant needs most. Let me tell you what nitrogen actually does, because this is where the store really has you fooled. Nitrogen is the building block of green growth, leaves, stems, the whole leafy body of the plant. A rose coming back from near death needs to rebuild its body before it can ever think about flowers. It needs to push leaves so it can catch sunlight, so it can feed itself, so it can climb back to health. Nitrogen is what makes that happen. Used coffee grounds run about 2% nitrogen by weight, and they release it slow and steady as they break down, which is exactly what you want. A jolt of fast chemical nitrogen can actually burn a weak plant. The slow feed from coffee grounds never will. But here is where most folks go wrong, and I want to save you the heartache. Do not pile fresh, wet coffee grounds in a thick mat right up against the stem. When grounds clump wet and thick, they can grow a crust that sheds water and even go a little sour. The trick my mother used was simple. She mixed the used grounds into the soil, or scattered them thin, no thicker than you would salt a piece of meat, and raked them lightly into the top of the dirt around the plant, a good handful or two per bush. Then she topped it with a little straw or old leaves, something else worth knowing. Used coffee grounds, the ones you already brewed, are close to neutral in acidity. Most of the acid washes out into your cup. So the old warning that coffee grounds will turn your soil too sour is mostly overblown for the brewed kind. It is the fresh, unbrewed grounds that carry the acid, and those you would use sparingly and only around plants that like it. Here is a small thing that turns this from good to remarkable. Coffee grounds do not just feed the rows, they feed the earthworms. Worms are wild for coffee grounds, and where you scatter grounds, worms gather, and where worms gather, they tunnel and cast and turn your hard soil soft and rich and full of air. My father used to say, the worms do the plowing we do not have time for. A struggling rose in hard, packed clay is choking as much as it is starving, and the worms that coffee grounds bring will loosen that ground around the roots better than any tool you could buy. Do this every couple of weeks with your morning grounds through the season. You are not just fertilizing. You are building living soil, the kind that keeps feeding the plant long after you have walked away. And it costs you exactly nothing because you already made the coffee. Now, I know what some of you are thinking right about now. You are thinking, this all sounds fine for somebody starting a brand new bed with fresh soil, but my roses have been in the same ground for 15 years, my dirt is tired and packed hard as a road, and I am not about to dig everything up and start over. I hear you, and I want to stop right here and talk to you especially, because you are the very person these old ways were made for. The plain truth is that these methods work better on an established plant than a new one, and here is why. An old rose has a deep, wide root system already built. It has the machinery. What it has lost over the years is not its roots. It is the food and the life in the soil around those roots, drawn down season after season and never put back. You do not need to start over. You need to feed what is already there right where it stands. So here is what you can do this very weekend with nothing but what I have already named and a garden fork or even a sturdy stick. Walk out to your oldest, saddest rose. Take that fork and push it straight down into the soil about 8 inches out from the base all the way around the plant and just rock it back and forth to crack the soil open. Do not turn it and chop the roots. Just fracture the hard ground so air and water can get down. Make a ring of these holes all around. Old-timers called this a way of letting the ground breathe again. Now into those cracks and over that ring, put your feed. Scatter your dried banana powder for potassium. Work in a couple handfuls of coffee grounds for nitrogen. Pour your gallon of Epsom salt water slowly over the whole ring so the magnesium runs down into those fresh openings. Top it off with a layer of old leaves or straw, a couple inches thick, kept back from the stem to hold the moisture in and keep the worms working. That is it. No digging up, no starting over, no special equipment. You have just taken a 15-year-old plant in tired ground and given it, in one afternoon, the 3 things it has been missing for years, and you did it with kitchen scraps and a fork. An established garden is not a disadvantage here. It is the whole point. My people have kept the same rose beds alive for lifetimes doing exactly this, feeding the old plants in place generation after generation because we could not run to a store and did not want to. And that raises a question that has probably been nagging at you this whole time. If all of this is so simple, so cheap, so obviously right there in the kitchen, why does nobody tell you? Why do you walk into the big store in spring and see a whole aisle, wall to wall, of bags and bottles and boxes with rose pictures on the front, every one of them promising the world for $20 and $30 and $40? I will tell you why, and it is the plainest reason there is. There is no money in a banana peel. Nobody can put a patent on a coffee ground. An entire industry has been built not on solving your problem, but on keeping you coming back every single spring to buy the solution again. They do not sell you the knowledge, they sell you the dependence. And the surest way to keep a person dependent is to make him believe the answer is complicated, scientific, something only a company in a factory could make. My people were never told any of this, and so we never lost it. The outside world was told to buy and buy and buy until it forgot it ever knew another way. That is worth being a little angry about. Not the wild kind of angry, the quiet kind. The kind that makes you walk out to your own yard and take back something that was always yours. And if you want to go deeper than what I can fit into one sitting, everything I have shared here and a great deal more that goes well beyond roses is written out in full in the Garden Blueprint and the Harvest Blueprint, 2 field guides I put together so this knowledge does not get lost again. Old-fashioned pest cures, soil secrets, storage methods passed down through generations of plain farmers, all of it in one place for around the price of 2 bags of store fertilizer. You can find both books, along with the complete garden field edition, linked in the description below. Take a look when you are done here. But before I give you the last one, the real secret, there is a 4th feed I have to hand you, because it fixes the one problem that quietly kills more roses than any bug or blight, and it comes out of the same egg you fried for breakfast. Eggshells. Here is the problem nobody talks about. Roses need calcium, and they need a lot of it, but calcium is strange among nutrients. A plant cannot move it around once it takes it in. Nitrogen, potassium, those travel freely through the plant to wherever they are needed. Calcium does not. It only goes where the water carries it into the newest growing tips. And if there is not enough coming up steady from the roots, at the exact moment a new bud or leaf is forming, that new growth comes out weak and deformed. In roses, low calcium shows up as weak cane walls, buds that never quite open right, and a plant that just cannot hold itself up. Calcium is also what builds the cell walls, the very structure of the plant, the stiff frame that holds a cane upright and lets a bush stand tall instead of sprawling on the ground. A rose short on calcium is like a barn built with soft green lumber. It cannot bear its own weight. An eggshell is almost pure calcium carbonate, around 95% of it. That is the same mineral they mine and grind up and sell as garden lime. You have been putting it in the trash. Same trick as the banana, and the same crime by the store. They sell you ground up rock for calcium when you crack the same mineral over a skillet every morning. Now here's the catch, and it is why so many folks try eggshells and give up. A whole shell, or even big broken pieces, takes years to break down. Years. Toss a cracked shell in your bed, and it will still be sitting there, white and hard, 2 summers from now doing nothing. The calcium is locked up tight until the shell breaks down to a fine powder, so you have to do the breaking yourself. Save your shells, let them dry out on the windowsill for a day or 2, then grind them, and I mean really grind them, to a fine powder, near as fine as flour. A coffee grinder or an old blender does it in seconds. In the old days, it was a mortar and pestle, or just a clean jar and a hardwood dowel, and my sisters and I took turns pounding shells into powder on winter evenings. That fine powder breaks down in the soil in a single season instead of many, and the calcium becomes available to the roots in weeks. Work a couple tablespoons of eggshell powder into the soil around each rose in early spring, and again at midsummer. Scratch it into that same feeding ring around the base. It does double duty, it feeds calcium, and because it is a carbonate, it gently sweetens soil that has gone too sour over the years, nudging it back toward the sweet spot roses love. There is even a way to make it work faster, and this is the old kitchen trick. Take your eggshell powder, put it in a jar, and pour vinegar over it. It will fizz and foam, that is the acid pulling the calcium loose. Let it sit a day, then water that down heavy, about a cup of the liquid to a gallon of water, and pour it around the plant. Now the calcium is already dissolved and ready to drink. My grandmother swore a poorly floppy rose stood up straighter within a couple weeks of this. So now look at what you are holding. Potassium from the banana for blooms, magnesium from the Epsom salt for green, nitrogen from the coffee for growth, calcium from the eggshell for strength. 4 of the things a rose needs most, every one of them free, every one of them already in your kitchen this morning. You could stop right here and grow roses better than half the folks paying $40 a bag. But I promised you the one that brings back the dead, the finale, the thing my grandfather pulled out that gray April morning after the banana peel, the thing that turned a brown skeleton of a plant into a bush, blooming by June. And of everything I am telling you today, this is the one almost nobody knows, because it is the one the science world only caught up to about 50 years ago, long after my people were already using it. It is alfalfa, plain alfalfa. The same dried green hay we fed the horses and the cattle, the same stuff sold today in a pressed pellet as rabbit food or livestock feed, a big sack of it for a few dollars at any feed store. That is the secret. And here is why it is not like the other four, why it is not just another source of a mineral. Alfalfa contains a natural growth compound called triacontanol. Now that is a mouthful, so let me just tell you what it is. It is a plant growth hormone, a natural signal made by the plant itself that tells other plants to grow. And here is the part that ought to raise the hair on your arm. Back in the 1970s, a researcher named Dr. Stanley Reese at Michigan State University was studying why crops sometimes grew faster than the added nutrients could explain. In 1977, he and his team published their findings in the journal Science, showing that this compound, triacontanol, pulled from alfalfa, could increase plant growth by 10, 20, even 30%, and it worked in tiny amounts. Not a fertilizer feeding the plant, a hormone waking the plant up, telling it to grow. Read that again. A scientist at a major university in 1977, in one of the most respected journals in the world, confirmed that the green hay in our barn contained a growth trigger so powerful it worked in traces. And what were we doing with it? We were already brewing it and pouring it on the roses because our elders had noticed, long before anybody knew the word triacontanol, that a rose watered with alfalfa did not just feed it, exploded with new growth. Fresh red canes shooting from the base, buds where there had been bare wood. The whole plant coming alive. The outside world forgot. We never did. So here is exactly how you make it. This is the alfalfa tea, and this is what I want you to do this weekend to that plant you thought was gone. Take 1 cup of alfalfa pellets, the plain kind, no added molasses, no salt, just alfalfa. Put them in a 5-gallon bucket and fill it with water. Now, I will be straight with you, as it steeps, it smells strong, like a wet barn. Set it out back, away from the porch. Let it sit for 3 to 5 days, stirring it when you walk by. The pellets will swell and fall apart into a thick green brew. That green water is loaded with the triacontanol, plus a good dose of nitrogen and trace minerals besides. Then pour it, a full gallon of the tea, around the base of a good-sized rose, poured slow so it soaks down to the roots. For your dying plant, drench it good. Do this once in early spring, once in early summer, and if a plant is truly struggling, a 3rd time. Within 2 to 3 weeks on a warm spring, watch the very bottom of that plant, right where the canes meet the ground. That is where you will see it first. New red growth pushing out where you were sure there was nothing left alive. That is the triacontanol doing what my grandfather trusted it to do without ever knowing its name. And if you do not want to brew the tea, you can simply scratch a 1/2 cup of the dry pellets into the soil around each bush and water them in. They break down over a few weeks and feed the same thing, just slower. Either way works. The tea works faster on an emergency. The pellets are easier for keeping strong plants strong. That is the whole secret. A $3 sack of livestock feed holds a growth hormone that a university proved works in traces almost 50 years ago, and to this day you will not find it on the front of a single bag in the garden aisle, because there is no fortune to be made telling you to go to the feed store instead of theirs. Now think about what has happened here. You came in with a plant you were ready to dig out, and you are leaving with 5 things, every one of them free or nearly free, every one of them already within arm's reach in your house or a few dollars down the road, that together can feed a rose fully and shock a dying one back to life. The banana for the blooms, the Epsom salt for the green, the coffee for the growth, the eggshell for the strength, and the alfalfa to wake the whole thing up from the roots. You did not need the aisle. You never did. And that is the thing I most want you to carry away from this. Not just a recipe, but the quiet fact that something was taken from you. Not stolen in the night, sold away a little at a time every spring until you forgot you ever had it. The knowledge that your own kitchen and a bit of hay could do what they charged you $40 for. My people held on to it only because we had no store to run to and no money to spend, and it turns out that was not a hardship at all. It was a gift. You are not a person who likes being sold something he does not need. You never were. You are the kind who would rather do it himself with his own hands out of what he already has and know exactly what went into the ground. That is who these old ways belong to. That is who you are. So do this for me. Go back up to that comment box and tell me where you are growing your state or your zone, so I know whether you are timing this for an early southern spring or a late northern one. And if one of these 5 is new to you, tell me which one you are going to try first on your worst rows. I read them and I answer. Do not just think it, write it down, because this whole thing works better when we are trading what we know instead of buying what we are told. And if you would like to keep recovering the things that were quietly taken from us, the plain, useful knowledge my grandfather handed me and his grandfather handed him, then come along and subscribe, not to prop up a channel, but to sit at the table with folks who have decided to stop overpaying for what nature already gives away. Because next time, I am going to show you the one thing my grandfather buried at the base of every rose he planted, not to feed it, but to keep the beetles and the aphids off it all summer long without a drop of poison. It is sitting in your pantry right now, and once you know it, you will never spray again. You know, everything I just showed you was only the first of the 5. Inside the Amish field circle, I take you through my grandfather's full rose revival method, picking up right where this stopped. And if you get stuck, ask me your own question. I answer you myself. A real person, growers just like you are already in there with me. Just point your phone at the code, cancel anytime. I'm Eli. Come join me. If this helped bring your roses back, there's plenty more like it waiting for you here. Subscribe and stay with me, and let's keep growing something beautiful together.